I get commissioned to review all kinds of stuff. Things that people want me to tear into, things that they love and they hope I will too. Sometimes it's just stuff that's just weird. So we're talking about London Road today. Yeah, this one's weird. So I feel like I need to kind of skip to the end right up front. This is based on a stage play. And I have absolutely not a single doubt in my mind that it works very well as a stage play. But wow, does it not work as a film? And that has nothing to do with like they butchered it or they changed it. I'm assuming they changed it very little. It's because like I can watch this and see what it's doing and go and I can picture in my head how it would look on a stage and think I would really be resonating with this if it was on a stage. But it's not. And it's not suited to film at all. I feel like I got to explain what this thing is because I don't actually know how well known it is. I didn't know what it was. So, all right, a little bit of real life history here. Back in 2006, on a street called London Road in, I think it was Ipswich, England, there were a number of killings. There were 5 prostitutes who were murdered, and a gentleman by the name of Stephen Wright was ultimately convicted of those killings. What this is this is a story constructed out of interviews held with people from that road. So it's interviewing, the people with their thoughts on the killings, on what happened, on, their feelings about the conviction. We've got some stuff from newsreaders at the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all taken verbatim. So this isn't like sort of a what's the word? Historical fiction. This isn't that. This is literally taking the things said by the people who were there in interviews and translating it directly into the words that will be coming out of the actors' mouths. Now, I've seen that done before. Like the piece of work that I'm most familiar with that from is the Laramie Project, which, for anyone who doesn't know that, in the 90s there was the killing of Matthew Shepard. And he was a young gay man, and the 2 men who killed him, their defense was what was known as the gay panic defense, basically trying to argue in court that he came on to them, and because they're not gay, they panicked so badly at being hit on that they aren't responsible for their actions. It didn't work. They went to jail, as well they dang should have. But the Laramie Project is a play constructed very much in the same way, taking the actual interviews with the people who were affected by this, lived in the town, knew Matthew, or knew the people, the guys who killed him, and giving voice to that. And it's fascinating because it actually works better as a play than as anything else, in my personal opinion, especially with something like the Laramie Project. It exists largely at this point as something that gets done in community theaters, and I actually think that's where it plays best because you watch it performed and it creates a much more realistic sense of you're just learning about this community and the people in it when you see it performed by people in your own community. But that's a slight tangent. But that's my point being there that I'm familiar with verbatim theater. I've seen it done. So where London Road gets weird on its first level of weirdness is it's a musical. But like the lyrics of the music are the direct verbatim words from interviews, like to the points of keeping in the ums and uhs and any stutters or repeats of words that these people said when being recorded is integrated into the lyrics and the musical composition. Now I'm not going to say that's bad. That feels experimental for the sake of being experimental, if I'm going to be completely honest. It feels like a self-imposed challenge done for its own sake. But again, that having been said, I could see it working on stage. Because I think the other thing that I found myself thinking of, aside from the Laramie Project, is a play that I actually saw performed in London called Blood Brothers. And Blood Brothers is not a true story, and it's not a verbatim play, but it is a musical, and it's a very heavy, dour musical. Its songs aren't particularly memorable. They're not designed to be. They're not designed to be catchy. There isn't any chorus that's going to be stuck in your head coming out. But it does give the play a certain energy as it propels itself along that you wouldn't have gotten if it wasn't a musical. So I also have a certain amount of appreciation for musicals where the music being really good isn't actually a selling point, but the fact that it is a musical is still to the benefit of the story. So I'm familiar with that as well. And it's those two things together that make me see this and go, I could totally see this working as a play. Let's talk about why it doesn't work as a film. I think the first thing is there's something that the people putting the original work together with the music did that it falls apart badly in film because of the much lower degree of willful suspension of disbelief in film versus theater. And so what that is the closest thing any of these songs have to a chorus is that they'll repeat the same point, repeat the same line over and over and over again, but not always the same character. Like, I think presumably like the first character who we hear sing something is supposed to be the one, the equivalent to the real person who actually said it, but then they'll put those exact same lyrics into another character's mouth, or like the whole chorus will sing it. And that's something that can work on stage because it gives you a sense of, especially when you're seeing all these people share the stage space at the same time, it gives you a sense of this one person's notion kind of spreading and being shared throughout the community. But with isolated shots in camera where it's just, here's this one person, and now here's this other one person singing the exact same thing, it doesn't create the same sense of being a community. It just makes me go, wait, so do they both think the exact same thing? Or am I not supposed to ascribe this specific thought to any specific person, but just to the community as a whole? Except I know it was a specific person because he did it in an interview. Again, just the nature of film being more naturalistic and realistic, because other than the singing, this is very, very grounded in its presentation. It is not visually stylized at all. And so the reality and the sense of realness brought by the way it is shot and just the nature of film versus theater really works against the entire concept of the thing. The whole idea of doing this as a musical, it can work on a stage where you already, when you first sit down, you already know that's not a real street, that's not a real house. Like I said, the suspension of disbelief is just bigger inherently sitting down into theater. It always is. And as a result, because you are already extending a much greater amount of willful suspension of disbelief when you go to a theater production, you can get away with stuff that just plays weird and wrong in film. And I feel like this kind of exemplifies that really well, because the sense of reality brought by the camera, it completely counteracts what the music is doing. And it made the repetitiveness of those lines getting repeated, because that happens a lot, and it felt repetitive and like in a wheel spinning kind of way here, in a way that I doubt it would have on stage, but it really does feel that way here. I'd say, like, honestly, the only time that it truly comes alive and like gels with the film format is when the reporters are all scrambling and getting ready to report on the verdict. And when, these reporters and these camera people and these radio personalities and all these people, they're like stepping on each other's toes, and they're trying to muscle each other out of the way. They're trying to get their facts straight and get in position where they can get the facts and get them told. Like, that energy really works with the way it's shot, as they're kind of jostling each other, and there's a real propellant sense of energy to it that makes that whole section work really well, and in a way that pretty much the entire rest of the thing doesn't. Now, like, I'm saying it doesn't work. It's not bad. And if you are unable to see it as a stage play, which honestly, I'm unable, it's not performed in the US, I wouldn't say that it's the worst thing in the world to have this be the way you experience it. But I will really stand by the fact that even though I haven't seen the play to make the comparison, I feel super confident saying that this does not do the play justice. It just doesn't click right. And then there's some other stuff in the actual telling of the story that leaves me just kind of so first thing, of all the people talked to, these various people in this neighborhood, various genders, ages, some people in couples, some people single, people with various feelings, and in some cases getting at some really nasty notions. There's a character played by Olivia Colman who towards the end, effectively says, I'm glad Stephen Wright killed those girls because it got rid of the prostitutes around here. And I'm glad he did it, and I have no sympathy for the girls. She actually says that. She says, I have sympathy for the families, but not for them. And there's a real darkness, there's a real ugliness uncovered in that. And I want to praise this more for dealing with that reality, except for the fact that actual street workers, actual prostitutes who were interviewed for this, they do not have a voice for 2/3 of the thing. It's an hour and a half long, and it is an hour into it before we hear a single thing said or sung by one of the surviving girls, one of the prostitutes who wasn't killed. And they don't get much. They don't really get the humanization that the residents of the street get. And you cannot help but come away with feeling a sense of them as not residents, but intruders. And it makes total sense that the locals feel that way about them. But the way the story's told, it kind of frames them that way too. And it doesn't help that we basically really only get their voices once. One scene. And it's not a bad scene, but it's one scene, and then it's right back to the people on the street again and the focus on them. And even as it ends with, this image of this young woman, sort of ending on her as a visual, or, towards the end, and giving her some visual weight, they don't get a voice. And as someone who has brought up their issues with the way sex workers are frequently depicted, I kind of have a problem with that. Now, look, to a certain extent, I get that there are things that I would normally complain about that I have no business complaining about here. Because normally I would harp on at this point about how I'm really exhausted of the depiction of sex workers, prostitutes in particular, as being drug addicts who are just desperate. Now, I'm not going to make that complaint here because in their own words, and I'm not going to take away the agency of these women's own words, that is what their reality was in 2006 in that location. So you will hear no complaint from me about that. If that was their reality, that was their reality. But the fact that they have so little voice, and that, again, while I appreciate the film not flinching at showing some of the real ugliness in the way the other residents of the street viewed them, it doesn't really feel like it does anything other than just go, well, that's kind of terrible, isn't it? Okay, could you counteract it a little? Could you give more voice to these people who are simply being looked on and judged, either pitied or seen as trash? Because that's basically it. You either have people saying like, oh, these girls, they kind of ruin the street, or they're going, these poor girls. Could they be something other than a symbol of drug addiction and destitution? Because they're people. Have them be people. So I've got some issues there as well. Now, I should acknowledge at this point, there may be a logistical hurdle in that, which is it's distinctly possible that the number of prostitutes willing to talk to the people who were doing these interviews, or the amount that they were willing to share, or the number of times they were willing to speak might have given such limited material for them to work with that this was all they could pull together. I'm going to acknowledge that possibility right now simply because I don't know if that's the case. And if it was, then maybe this truly was the best that they could get with the format they were choosing to tell the story with. But since I don't know that for the fact, I still feel the need to kind of be like, I think those are my major things. Oh, it's really weird that Tom Hardy is like, his image is used heavily in the marketing for this because he's barely in it. Like, I think he's the least seen person in the dang thing, to be honest. I don't know what he's doing here. I don't know. And it's not weird that he's here, and he's not bad or anything, but it's just weird that his name was plastered on stuff. It's like, he doesn't do anything. Like, Olivia Colman stands out. And most of the other performers aren't people I recognize, but they felt very real, which they should if you're doing verbatim style storytelling. But it's just, I wish I'd seen it as a play. I think I would have appreciated it as a play. I have almost no doubt in my mind that it's really good as a play. As a film, though, it's kind of a mess. And it's not because the film is badly made, it's just because what it was designed to do on stage doesn't work on film. It's the same reason I harp on about Into the Woods and the tonal shift of that movie, because that works as a stage play because that tonal shift happens after the intermission. So you have the entire intermission after the first act ends in a big happily ever after song. You get up, you stretch, and you think, hey, wait a minute, we've still got half the show to go. What's going to go on in Act 2? And it kind of preps you just by the intermission wait that something is going to go wrong, that a shoe's going to drop, and that prepares you for the tonal shift that in the movie they just barrel on ahead and hit, and it's really jarring. It's just one of those cases where this was designed to work in a specific medium, and film is not it. It just isn't. London Road, have you seen it? Movie or stage version? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon was how I was commissioned to review this, and you can commission me to review things as well. Why am I doing this with my head? Don't know. But don't worry about it too much. Take a relaxed attitude around here. So, you can come on back next time you need a break. And credits. I gotta shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Leotha Boyd, TT, Renobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspro, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.